Welcome to the Success Revenue Podcast, the only podcast in the Middle East that brings you leaders in customer success, account management, sales, and go to market to share ideas, perspectives, and valuable learnings on how to successfully drive revenue, delight customers, and take it to the next level.
We're your host. I'm Hadel Saab, the CEO of RevSetter, the modern customer management platform. And with me, I have my amazing co-host, Ivy Ferrero, CS executive, speaker, and advisor. And we are so excited to bring you a long list of amazing guests on this season of the Success Revenue Podcast. Today's guest is no exception, someone that I've talked to before and spent some time with, an amazing leader in customer success. We will discuss several different topics, including how customer success is evolving when it comes to the role of customer success and seeing customer success as a philosophy. We'll, of course, speak about AI and the impact of AI within customer success and across businesses in general. And we'll also get a feel for the differences between driving customer success in large markets like the Americas and in growth markets like the Middle East. Today's conversation, Ivy, I know you're going to really enjoy. Our guest is someone, again, I've talked to before a few different times about a lot of different topics. And he brings just a great perspective and a great experience to the conversation, CS, AI, and business in general. So very excited for this.
Yeah, I'm so excited to meet Dillon.
Amazing. Yeah. And you know what? I'm also excited is to be inside, Ivy. I've been out a lot today, running between, meetings and things. And it's getting so hot here. Anyway, the 43 or 110 to those in the US listening. Getting, real Dubai summer here right now.
Yeah, it's gonna be a hot summer. How hot does Los Angeles get during the summer?
It doesn't. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Los Angeles, like towards the coast, so Santa Monica, now the west side of LA, it really doesn't ever get above like 85, 90, 95, which is like around 30, 35, 36, 37. But then you'll have like a heat wave that always hits somewhere in like September, late August, September, you'll get the heat wave coming and it will go up to, 100, 105 in the US, which is about 38, 39. And that's really hot over there, but it's not as humid. So it's much more humid here. So you get humidity plus the, 40 plus Celsius, which really kind of a little different level of heat, I would say.
Yeah, no, for sure. Unfortunately, I'll be here this summer, so I'll be indoors a lot of the time.
That's right. You're staying. Yeah, I'll be in Europe. I go to Riyadh first next week. So you know how it is. Always every episode we talk, I'm in Riyadh the week before, the week after. At this point, but yeah, I'll be there next week and then back here, and then I'll be in Europe in July. In August, probably travel back and forth, maybe US, Europe here. So yeah, I'll avoid the heat a little bit at least, but I'll be on a plane a lot this summer.
And where is, I guess we'll have an opportunity to ask Dillon, but where is he located at?
He's on the East Coast of the US. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Believe, yes. Yeah, so he is 7, 8 hours, something like that, behind where we are today. So it's early morning for him once we record this. So I'm sure he'll be, with his morning coffee and ready to go.
Okay, well, let's not wait anymore. I am excited to meet Dillon. So what do you say? Should we bring him in?
Let's do it. Bring him on.
Okay, here we go.
Awesome. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of the Success Revenue Podcast. And we are so excited to bring on today's guest. Is someone that I want to know, and actually I had a conversation with him before this, and he is someone that has amazing background, amazing experience and expertise. So super happy to present Dillon Young, who's a 3-time customer success leader. He's also a podcast host, so he has experience doing what we're doing here today. And he runs a daily CS podcast called The Daily Startup with Lifetime Value. And not only that, he's also the founder and the principal consultant of Customer Value Lab, where he helps early stage SaaS companies optimize their customer success and really take it to the next level. And I'll add something to your intro as well there, Dillon, which I love that you have on your LinkedIn. It's if you are kind of tired of losing the customers that you work so hard, bringing on board as the business, and you're not really successful in selling more to them, they should talk to Dillon. So that's, I think, something that a lot of companies out there experience a little bit too much and not enough net retention expansion. So Dillon's your guy when it comes to that, and his consultancy. The team there is amazing, and we'll be able to definitely shed a lot of light on how you can do that better. So Dillon, welcome to today's show. We're super excited to have you on. And yeah, early morning for you, where you're based, right?
Yeah. Well, so thank you for having me. And yes, I'm like, my heart is still racing trying to get my son out the door and to school, me in a presentable state, get some coffee in my system. But thank you for having me. Wonderful opportunity to be here.
Oh, we're so
Yeah.
excited to have you, Dillon.
Absolutely. And, Ivy is a mother. I'm a father of three. So, we know all about the early morning,
Okay.
get everything ready. So we definitely appreciate you being on, and you look great and ready to go here. So you couldn't even notice. Awesome.
Well, thank you.
Perfect, Dillon. So, Dillon, why don't we jump right in? I know the audience would love to kind of start by learning a little bit more about yourself and your background. So why don't you give us just kind of the high level background, kind of your domain that you work in, obviously customer success, how that came about. Let's start there.
I went to school for, no, I'm kidding, right? Because nobody ever has. I went to school
Right.
for something obviously completely different. And then I just fell into the startup world. I happened to be decent at talking to customers. And so they just kept kind of like putting me in front of customers until it became a little bit more official. I don't even think we were calling it customer success back then. I was like a client manager and an account manager. I was doing support. I was managing product. I've done sales. And so like, I've always lived in these early stage startups where I've worn a ton of hats. And only in maybe, let's say, like the past 5-7 years did it become more sort of like structured as customer success, as post sales customer management. And then I started managing teams and sort of like teaching them the same stuff that I learned very painfully by failing and falling on my face over and over again. And then that led me to where I am. I got laid off back in 2023. I think like half of the industry did, probably. And I was like, you know what? I'm kind of tired of working for other people, banging my head against the wall, teaching them how I think customer success should work, trying to create structure. So I created Customer Value Labs, which is all about helping early stage founders operationalize much earlier. I think customer success early on is just sort of like this gap filler. And sometimes it works if you have a rock star and they take the time to create structure and process and prioritize. And they say, dude, customer, you don't make enough money or you don't pay us enough money. I can't deal with you right now. But if you have sort of like let's say like an average or just above average CSM, they're going to burn out trying to do everything. And these companies need help defining what customer success should be, what it should be focusing on, and how to execute on those things. And that's where I come in.
Amazing. Yeah, it's such a great journey there, right? From being operational and running teams, building, and like you said, then being able to probably half of the industry were definitely probably laid off back in those 2022, 2023 years, but then be able to take all that knowledge and then transfer that in helping organizations. And as someone else does a lot of advising and things of that nature, there's a real struggle for especially startups, early stage, and even honestly at this point, some scale-ups and growth stage companies to understand how to work with customers. So that's, I think, an amazing transfer of knowledge that can happen through the type of work that you're doing, Dillon. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that work? I'm curious to hear kind of, obviously you started Customer Value Labs, you work with a lot of different types of startups and companies, but tell me about that journey. How's that been? Where are you today? What is your kind of focus? Great to hear more about that.
So I thought I was a genius when I started this company. So I was like, I'm going to get in and I'm going to get out. Like, because I'm a guy who gets bored. I sort of like take a project, I optimize it, or I build it from 0 to 1. And then I'm like, okay, I want to leave. And so that was the theory I brought to consulting. And I was like, I'm not going to be fractional. I don't want to advise. I don't want to be in your Slack channel. Like, let's fix one particular milestone in your journey, operationalize it, and then I'm going to leave. And then I started pitching that to people and they were like, yeah, dude, that's just what like McKinsey and the big guys do. Like they generate a really big report and they say, and you could pay us more money if you want us to do it. So that's honestly what I do is companies come to me and they say, my retention is 75, 80%. I'd like to get it to 90 plus percent. Me and my team, we come in, we do a full scale audit of every piece of the business. It's not just post sales. We're going to look at product. We're going to look at sales. We're even going to look at things like engineering to understand how they all fit together. And then obviously we do a ton of analysis. We develop a report and a recommendation. And then folks can run with that themselves, which a handful do. Or typically what they'll say is, okay, can you help us with that? We've got a ton of frameworks. We've got a ton of relationships with vendors like RevSetter and other CSPs, certain onboarding systems that we can say like, yeah, this is exactly what you need for your situation. And it fits your economic criteria, so on and so forth. In other cases, we'll just build a system of Google Sheets for people that help them move faster, prioritize, segment, all of those things that, when you're a small company, you don't really have the capability to stop and to do that because another ticket just came in and you just sold another deal and something's on fire. And I think the other day, their entire Heroku system went down. So they're getting calls from all of their customers and having to deal with that. And that's what happens in early stage. So it's almost more valuable to bring somebody else in to help you build that structure while you're keeping the trains running.
Mm. Dylan, and there's a question that always comes to mind, and it's in order for you to make significant impact, do you sign contracts for terms like a minimum of 3 months, or how do you make sure that you don't put yourself in a situation where they think it's gonna magically appear the outcomes, but you give yourself enough runway to deliver?
I work in a sprint, so typically I'm offering a 13-week sprint, which typically ends up being about 90 days. And roughly what that turns into is the first 30 to 45 days is that analysis. We're doing a ton of interviews and deep dives. We're talking to customers as well to understand the experience and the operations. And then the second 45 is we are building the report and we're then sort of like socializing that and iterating upon it. And at the end of that, you will have a very detailed plan for how to move forward. And I'll keep using the retention piece because it's easy. There's a lot of stuff you can do that shows like you're doing X, Y, or Z today. If you shift that slightly to ABC, you're going to see an increase that looks like this. A lot of it is just math. And the other thing I'll point out is a lot of what I talk to my customers about is if you're a 2 million ARR business today, which is relatively small, and you see a 3% increase in your retention rate, that's $60,000. I don't even charge $60,000. So it's pretty easy to justify the ROI of a project like this if you don't have somebody in place. Not to mention, and Haidar, I know you know this, that $60,000 of saved money actually looks very different in terms of valuation. That can be anywhere from, let's say, 300 to 600 grand in valuation and additional investment dollars you can get. So it's a pretty easy math problem when you present it that way. But we can't guarantee anything. I mean, there's a piece of this that is they've got to execute on what we share with them. As you get into those larger engagements where we're doing the work, we've got a few more guardrails in place around that of like, I need access to this person, this system. And we can give a few more, I won't say guarantees because there's no such thing as a guarantee, but we're pretty transparent about how important it is for them to lean in as well.
Got it. Makes sense.
And if you're paying that amount of money, you're going to, right?
Yeah. so much value. And Dylan, going back to your comment of 2023, I also was laid off from my job. And there was so much uncertainty during that year of what would happen to customer success. There has been obviously so much speculation on like, is it dying? Is it like, what is happening? From all of your experience that you have in customer success, where do you think customer success is evolving? And what do you think is coming up in the next years for this industry?
So, Ivy, I don't know if you know this about me, but I've got a theory. First of all, I think we have to define what customer success is. So I think and I do this all the time, but I think we get caught in this space of referring to customer success as though it is a role.
Mm.
And I'm a firm believer. I think this is a trope at this point, particularly on social media. But I am a firm believer that customer success is a philosophy. And it is a practice that makes your customers more successful. That's redundant. You're not supposed to use the words in the definition. But what I mean by that is I don't actually care if customer success managers exist, but you will always need to be articulating value to your customers and drawing the through line of how you help them, your products, your services, help them be successful in order to secure and earn the renewal. So in a subscription-based business, that's just the way it works. Now, whether that's a CSM or an account manager or support takes some of those responsibilities or marketing takes some of those responsibilities, I don't really care. But those motions always need to exist. So that's sort of a clarification, but also I think is an explanation of where I think customer success is headed.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, and I agree with you, Dylan. I think, I talk about this a lot. We don't have a unified definition. Most things related to customer success, or even honestly, when it comes to some of the key metrics that we're tracking, even on a business level, net retention. There's a formula, but different companies will add different things into their way of calculating that formula. Same thing with churn rates. Same thing with every other KPI that you can think of. Every health score is different. Every bookings and billings metrics, Rule 4. There's so much stuff out there that's just kind of floating. There's a general structure for it, and then everyone's putting in their own things in these definitions. And it's not different when it comes to the actual roles, right? I always say that it's not about, are you calling this person a CSM or an account manager or onboarding specialist, whatever it is. What is the responsibility? What is the motion that they're driving to ultimately make sure that the customer renews? Because that's really the ultimate goal, right? Like everything that we do in a business is bring in new customers, ensure they want to stay with us, grow with us, and everything's built around that in the business in general. So with that in mind, I agree totally with your philosophy there and the idea around it. I'm curious, someone like yourself that has been an operator and run teams, built, and kind of gone through that type of environment, and then also as a consultant, someone that comes in shorter sprints or longer engagements, different companies at a much higher velocity. What are some of the main learnings that you've seen when it comes to how companies approach customer success, the way they're working with it? Are there any learnings, any mistakes that you see commonly across the board? I'm curious, what are some of those key things that you've identified throughout your journey?
So this is a bit of the snake eating the tail here, because I'm sort of going to repeat back what you just said, which is my learning is push to define customer success as early as possible. So that looks like a couple of different things. I have this theory that a lot of CEOs, founding teams, they get their first investment money. And Haidar, maybe you can speak to this. And you're literally at the board meeting and you're shaking hands. You got the check, so to speak. I don't even know if you get paper checks anymore. I think it just gets a wire transfer, right?
Yeah.
But you're shaking hands, and then the board is leaving, and the last guy from the board, he's halfway out the door, and he goes, "Oh, and by the way, I need you to have a customer success team by next week." And he leaves before you can ask any questions. And the CEO's like, "I don't even know what that is. That's not what I do. I'm a product guy or I'm a sales guy." And so they Google, or nowadays they ChatGPT, and they get some sort of generalized sterilized explanation of a customer success manager. They turn that into a job description. They go and hire for a person that just seems hungry. And this was me. I've been this person who's hungry and can talk to customers and sort of like figures it out. And I literally think that's too late, because you now have somebody in seat who doesn't necessarily have the traits or the skills or the background that you actually need in customer success in order to be successful. So I think it sucks, because when you're early on, you're moving as fast as possible. And when somebody says something like that to you, whether that's, imagined or that's actually the way it works, you want to act on it immediately. When instead, I think what you need to do is you need to take a step back and you need to understand, what do your customers look like? Do they need to talk to somebody on a regular basis? Are they super technical? What's your product like? Is it a commoditized product, or is it super hard to rip out once you install it? That's going to change the personality type that you need to manage your customers and to interface with your customers on a regular basis. Many of these ideas are not mine. Like the one I just gave is from a very good friend of mine, Mr. Stephen Wise, who also consults. He's building his own solution. It does not compete with yours, Haidar, just so you know.
That's good. Steven's great. So yeah, I'll have that.
And then there's some other pieces of this that are a little bit more persona-y. And my very good friend and colleague, Rob Zambito, is very good at thinking and creating mental models around the personas you need within customer success. And I think that is the key, is understanding what your company does, what your product does, what its value is, and then going and find the person that supports that and fills that gap. But when I say fill that gap, I don't mean the sort of like generalist BS that we often hire for early on. I mean, you need somebody who can support the pieces that you don't already have in place. Is basically what I mean. That's what a good team does, is they complement each other, and that's what I'm trying to say.
That's so good.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I should go back to one of the things that you mentioned, ask your question about that. I'll also just add kind of a piece of nuance to what you said as well, which is, if you build that system and that structure in the wrong way as a startup, it's just so hard to turn that around as you grow and as you scale and as you start realizing all the holes that you kind of created by not doing it properly from the start. And you have to kind of go back and redo that. And it just, if you haven't gone through that as a founder, as like you said, a lot of people, especially in startups, even scale ups and even bigger companies that I advise, they may have come from product or sales. Typically, that's their background. Now they lead the company, CEOs, etc. They haven't seen that journey from 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 100, and seen all the things that go wrong along the way as you're scaling in customer success, and seeing like, oh, if we just did this differently at the start, we wouldn't be dealing with this headache now when it's really hard to change it. So I think setting that system from day one and make it dynamic so it can grow with you is such an important thing. And one thing I wanted to ask you, this kind of connects to that, but also what you said in terms of hiring, right? With the right traits. So if you think about startups and hiring your first operator in CS, and that sometimes that could be a CSM or whatever the role you want to call it, but a lot of times that initial hire, a lot falls on their plate to figure things out and to kind of build these systems or have help building these systems. What are some of those traits that you think are important to look for a leader's hiring in CS today, early stage or even beyond? What are some of the key things that you would look for if you're running as you do today, but let's say running a company, you're hiring your first CS people, what would you be kind of hiring for?
Some things come to mind. And this is sort of off the top of my head what I'm thinking of. Number one would be unflappable. Right? There's a lot of chaos in early stage companies. And if you're hired to build a department, a lot of it's going to fall on you. A lot of stuff that probably shouldn't, ticket escalations, and your first hire, it might just stop showing up one day. And you've got to be able to deal with stuff like that and not lose your mind. I think every day is a new day. And I think, I'm a big fan of this phrase of like we're not typically saving lives in customer success. So like it'll all be okay. There's some caveats to that around, if your system goes down for 24 hours and it's a logistics platform or a billing platform, like you could really get sideways there. But we're not necessarily nobody's going to get hurt necessarily. We might lose some money. Okay. Second would be just sort of this innate ability to l- live in two worlds. The ability to execute today, to get the thing done, and to know how to do so effectively, right? Like managing urgency versus perfection, right? But also always thinking about how do I do that better next time? How do I do that faster next time? How do I do that proactively next time? How do we avoid that entirely next time? Okay, so that's great. But then I think the third piece would be how do you prioritize your time to then actually act on those ideas that you've come up with? I mean, what do they say about ideas, right? Like the idea isn't actually worth anything. It's the ability to see it through, the ability to turn it into something. And Haidar, you know this probably very well. You probably talk to a ton of founders that are like, I got this great idea. And then they never follow through. They don't know how, right? They don't know how to prioritize. Things keep getting in the way. So those are probably the three for me.
I love that. Dylan, and I'm
Yeah.
curious to hear your thoughts about this. Often, what I've seen in startups is that, and this goes back to the philosophy that you're talking about on how can the whole company have this unified thinking about customer success being the responsibility of every department. So, but what I've seen in startups is that oftentimes they don't understand what customer success is. So they just see it as a customer success or like a customer support department, but they don't really understand that we're the glue that glues everything else, right? And so I kind of wanted to ask you, what is the best way of advocating for this philosophy within a company and get everybody on the same page?
It's going to be a super short answer. You ready?
Yes,
Money.
money.
Money. Start talking about it in terms of dollars.
Mm.
Hey, if we don't do this, X amount of dollars are at risk.
Yeah,
That's
that's
it.
the only thing. Yeah.
That's it. It's really hard to do, right? You got to draw that through line, point A to point B, a little bit of math involved. Maybe CSMs aren't the best at that. But
Yeah.
I think that's it. I
Yeah.
think that's it. And
Mm.
I talk about I talk about this a lot with newer leaders, but I think also anybody who sits in customer success is we talk a lot about the echo chamber, and I'm in the echo chamber hearing about the echo chamber. So it gets very meta, but I think we've got to do a much better job of speaking in a way our audience understands
Mm.
and not in a way that makes us in CS feel good.
Yeah.
Right? So when you're talking to executives, it's money, it's margin, it's efficiency. When you're talking to your customer, it's about their outcomes, what they're trying to accomplish, and not about logins or I see you didn't use this feature this month as much as you did last month. Well, like maybe their business changed. Why don't you ask that question instead of just saying like, I really need you to get those clicks up. So that's the biggest thing I would encourage folks to do is to just like step outside and reevaluate your messaging.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think at the end of the day, what businesses really care about is revenue. So I think that's the best way of getting the attention of the boardroom. And Dylan, with all the experience that you've had in global markets, what do you think are some of the trends you see in large markets like in America that you think could translate to growth markets like the one in the Middle East?
So I would actually like to pose a question to you two because I don't know that I've had a ton of experience in the Middle East. And I know it is just so culturally different. I mean, even Western Europe and America, which are often considered like the Western world, the exact same thing. There's so many differences there. So I would love to understand a little bit more. First of all, what are like the key differences that you see between let's say, North America or the United States and the Middle East?
Yeah. I mean, I'll go first. I'll say one thing for sure. I think the number one thing, it really comes down to building relationships and how much there's more like in America. Everybody wants to conduct business first, and they go straight to the business. But here, they first want to grow that personal relationship, go have coffee with the executive and whatnot. And then that's how business eventually ends up closing. I think that's the number one thing that I think it's so different. And therefore, the sales cycles are longer because you take so much time building that relationship at first. What do you think, Hader?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's definitely a key difference. I think you kind of, when you boil it down to the unit economics, longer sales cycles, much higher close rate, and those two things kind of combine together to kind of similar outputs as in the US, but just in a different framework. And I think here also, Dylan, like I think a big part of it is if you're thinking about business in the US and, whether that's customer success, sales, or anything else, the business environment is very conducive and similar to the just natural culture of Americans, right? With direct, friendly, all that stuff is
Yep.
there. Here is very similar, like the Middle Eastern culture, which is different from country to country, right? So every country is different. That's I think a big misconception from back home is, well, as the Middle East is one big market. No, every country is very different, but one thing that's consistent is trust, relationships, family. Those type of values are very important in society here, and they translate to business. So you hear a lot, they're not buying the product, they're buying you. Here that's much more of a thing than whereas back home that's relationship plays a role, of course, but they buy the value of the product first and foremost. Here they can buy the value that you bring them, and then the product is secondary to that because they will solve their issues anyway. They're confident in that because of you. So I think that's the biggest kind of difference from a culture perspective that translates to business as well.
It's interesting. So if it hasn't become clear, I'm like a hardcore systems thinker. And so I can have trouble bringing the relationship into the equation. It's hard for me. I'm very like black and white, dollars and cents, like how much time did it take and what did you save? But what I think is interesting about that is it compels me to want to look upstream and think about hiring practices. Because I think in America, it's very turn and burn. Like you hire people who you think have certain metrics, they've performed a certain way, and you can often let's keep the sales analogy going. You can often look the other way if they're a little bit prickly, if they don't always play well with others. And as a CS person, I have met a lot of those salespeople that are like, just get out of my way. I'm gonna do what I do, and you just deal with whatever I sell. And you're like, well, that's not really like the best way to do this. And so I wonder if in the Middle East, and maybe you guys can, confirm this or not, they probably spend a lot more time hiring for people that fit their culture and that can be trustworthy and that have a really good reputation in the space. Whereas in America, we try to systematize in such a way that we want these salespeople to be like plug and play.
That's good.
Yeah.
I would say reputation, network, and likability. I met somebody yesterday who has his own recruitment agency and is very successful. And he says the number one thing that they look for is how likable you are, because obviously you are going to be building relationships. So I that's so interesting.
It's definitely lends itself to a lot more enterprise thinking because it's an enterprise motion more so in a lot of ways with that relationship aspect. But let me ask you about that, Dylan, because speaking about hiring and the people aspect, relationships aspect, a topic that we have to touch on obviously is AI. And as AI now is evolving with everything going on, agentic AI, as you both know, as we pivot to fully AI on our end and our new AI product, I'm all about the AI stuff and test everything that's out there, know everything that's available. But I think one thing that's really shifting that I'm seeing at least out there with businesses is it's now gone from, reminds me of the early days of social media. It went from kind of a nice to have, let's do sandbox, experiment, test, see, a lot of personal use across the organization, to now becoming a must have, a mandate where it needs to start delivering business outcomes. And there's still a gap between those two things happening. I'm sure you come in to organizations and talk to different leaders where there's a mandate on the CS leader, or whatever go to market leader that you might be working with, to implement, adopt AI into the process, into the workflows and everything else. But a lot of people have a hard time with, okay, how do I do it? What do I do with it? Where's the outcome? How's it measured? And beyond just going to ChatGPT and throwing some emails and stuff like that in there, right? So
Mm.
how do you advise leaders around thinking about adopting AI now and leveraging it for their teams and their workflows? Does it impact how they hire, how they should go about their work? What is your thought and philosophy on that?
I think it controls everything now. Maybe control's not the right word. Influences everything now. It's a new tool at your disposal. Would you hire somebody who still tried to learn things by going to the library and reading books? No. You want somebody who their answer is, oh, I Google it, I go to YouTube, I ask my friends, maybe ask my friends. Like, it's
I
just
don't try.
innovative thinking. And now they have a new tool at their disposal, which is AI, which is, Google on steroids, basically. And so I think you've got to think about it in every aspect. I recently wrote a report for a customer about the impact that bringing on somebody who was, let's say, like part-time CS ops, but most of the time AI enablement just for the CS team, just creating prompts for CS, like a library of prompts that they use, just creating integrations between systems that has a pit stop with AI in the middle of it, just responsible for RFPing systems that have AI capabilities that make their work faster, like, let's say, like a Matic that does the AI QBR decks.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the savings is astronomical, particularly as your team gets larger, but as small as, I think I wrote this report for a team of 5, and the role essentially paid for itself just
Wow.
with AI. The way I think about AI, and I've said this on social media, and the way I encourage other people to think about AI, particularly in customer success, is treat it like, I don't know if you guys have these in the Middle East, the carpool lanes. Do you have carpool
No,
lanes where,
they don't
okay,
exist, but we're familiar with them, obviously.
yeah. So the idea for anybody listening is it's a lane on the highway that you're only allowed to drive in if you have, I think, 2 or 3 people or more in your car. And the whole idea originally, I don't even know if this works anymore, was to incentivize people to carpool to work and to use less gas, produce less emissions. And the reward was usually the speed limit was higher, it was less congested, so you could get through traffic much faster. Think of AI as the carpool lane. There are still people in the car. They start at home and they end up at the destination. But in the middle is AI that gets you there much faster, makes it much easier, reduces the friction. Think of AI that way and then apply that to every single process you have, or try to.
Yeah, I like that analogy a lot, because it just speaks to that, like you said, removement of friction in a lot of
Yeah.
processes to increase that speed and velocity, which is great. And I think especially now, kind of, let me ask you this, Dylan, because of agentic AI, right? So we're talking about the more advanced AI agents that are being built and are being made available. So going beyond the chatbots and the, what I call, kind of fake AI agents, which are essentially LLMs with some automation
Yeah.
tacked on there, and then name something and it's the product. But the actual true agentic AI that's coming now, which is very powerful and is continuing to improve every single day. There's new features and capabilities. How do you think that kind of impacts the makeup of the customer success, let's not call it function or role, because that might be called something else down the line, but the enablement of customer success as a philosophy? Do you foresee it being fewer people that have more generalist and high business understanding operating along these AI agents, or do you think the roles and the individuals that can managing customers or doing different roles within customers will continue thriving for the next few years, or do you think this is going to be a paradigm shift in terms of how we're creating our teams and leveraging these technologies to drive customer success?
I think it's all those things, and I think it really is going to depend on the organization and the way they want to design their roles and the talent they have at their disposal. I do believe, I don't think this is specific to CS. Like, I think you're reading a lot nowadays about how the bottom is falling out of the job market because so much of it can be done by AI SDRs. How do you get into sales nowadays if you don't start by cold calling and just doing the volume game and trying to set meetings? You got to go straight to being an AE, because with AI SDRs, the cost has dropped so significantly. Nobody really wants to be cold called anyways. So you're having to find new and creative ways to do it, like messaging online and emails and things like that. That is what AI is perfect for.
Yeah.
So how do you get into sales nowadays? I don't know if I know the answer to that, but you can then extrapolate that out to basically every single function. Accounting, another one. Engineering, another one. And so I'm not sure I have a phenomenal answer for your question, because I think we're still so early on.
Yeah.
But what I do believe is that coming out of college today, or getting ready to enter the workforce today, everybody, just like now, you have to know how to use a computer. If you're going to have a desk job, you have to know how to use a computer. I think you have to get your arms around AI immediately. And it's got to become perhaps the skill set you spend the most time honing, because soon enough, email's not going to matter. You're just going to talk to an AI that sits on your desk and say, hey, I need you to send Haidar an email that says bop, 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 and it's going to repeat it back to you, and it's going to send it. And you're going to say, hey, I need you to write me up a integration between these two systems, and it'll come back to you in 25 minutes with a full integration that it has tested and QA'd, and it's ready to deploy at the click of a button, sort of thing. Like, if you aren't on the forefront of that and you aren't thinking about that and deprioritizing the things that are just literally not going to exist, like going to the library in the next 5 years, then I think you're doing yourself a disservice. And I think flip that. That's the way founders should be thinking too. Now, you can't start making those decisions in totality today. So you've got to find, particularly as a founder, you've got to find a way to sort of like sit on that fence. You've got to hire people who have the skill sets that we still need today, but are open and innovative to learning those new skill sets, to adopting those new skill sets. And that's a tough place for you to be, Haidar, is what I would say.
Yeah. No, and I love it. I mean, I think, I'll add one note here, and I know I wants to chime in with a question, but I think as a leader, you need to have a vision and a strong belief of what you believe the future will look like, right? So, for example, the reason why we pivoted into the agentic space and launched our new agent platform is my core belief is we're going to have a hybrid future. You have your human workforce and you have your AI workforce, and they can work hand in hand, and you find a way for that. And I talk about human-led, AI-powered. That's what I believe the future will be, right? So as someone, if you believe that, then you need to build your company, your organization, your products to enable that future. And I think, and there are extreme, views on that. Like if you look at Artisan, I'm not sure if you guys saw they have these agent avatars that you can use. They just did like a brand commercial with like billboards and stuff. They got a lot of attention where it was literally, what was it, like stop hiring humans, hire artisans.
They don't sleep or something, like they work 24/7.
They don't take holidays half of the year, all that stuff. And
which is true.
which yeah, they could operate. And again, we provide agentic AI, so that's great if everyone just buys that. But my kind of counter to that was, well, if you truly believe that, then and every company is just run by only by agents and no humans, then what are the humans doing? Where are they making how are they making their living? What are they consuming, right? What are they doing? So I think you have to have a vision of the future, but it needs to also be a vision that some in some ways is kind of grounded in the fact that we still have humans on the planet that will live, operate, do things, and that the agents and AI and all that stuff needs to work in conjunction with that, not replace it completely 100%. So I
Uh-huh.
just think as a leader, you need to have that vision of what you believe will be the future, and then build, act, scale towards that. But I think too many leaders do not have what a clear vision of what they believe, and there's a lot of like, okay, let me see what everyone else believes, and kind of move about a little bit back and forth here and see as we figure things out. So I think that's just an extremely important piece of it. Yeah.
Wow, you guys are making me think about so many things. So first that I have is that I am a huge advocate for AI, and I'm particularly very excited about our children, like what the future will look like for them, right? I think it's fantastic that we're moving away from the whole psychology that you needed to go to school to earn 3 degrees and a PhD and all of this. And I'm really excited
Mhm.
because I think like in our children, this is going to promote more creativity, more authenticity, right? Because I feel like that's really going to be what matters the most in the future is how creative our children can be, not how many degrees they actually have. And what I find very exciting is that, let's say here in the UAE, there has been an announcement about the integration of AI as a mandatory subject in public schools starting at the age of 4. And
Wow.
which is insane. And there's also going to be a Dubai AI Academy, which aims to educate 10,000 emerging and experienced leaders in the field. And one of my mentors, and I'd love to take your take on this, Dylan and Hader. One of my mentors always taught. He's a really well-known keynote speaker, futurist keynote speaker. He basically teaches corporates how to adapt to the new age of AI. And one of the things he
Mm.
talks about when he gets asked about, like, hey, how do we stay relevant or how do we stay ahead from the competition? He always talks about how there needs to be a team that is working for the now and a team that is working for the future. So there's a team that is like constantly solving problems that you don't yet have, and how that's basically you just you give them a salary and you just let them
Mhm.
play. There
Yeah.
has to be like an engineer. I forgot
Sounds
what
like
it
a
is,
dream.
but yeah, so it's amazing to think in that capacity.
Well, think about Google did that for a really long time. I don't know if they still do it, but that 20% rule where you could spend
Hmm.
one day out of your 5-day work week just like experimenting. And it was that
Wow.
same theory of like, well, if we just let them go nuts, and I believe Google owns the IP of any of that work, then like
Yes.
you will hit on a golden nugget every once in a while. I think the other thing to keep in mind is like I have only started to think about this recently. I sometimes think like, how did people do work in the 80s? Like, what was everybody doing in offices? Because they weren't working on computers. They were just calling people and writing on paper. And then it became, by the time I entered the workforce, and I think the two of you probably similarly, it was all my work happens on the computer, but I still had to go into the office. Okay, well, then when COVID hit, much of the world said, okay, I do my work on the computer, but I do it at home. And to your point about university and not having to go and get PhDs, I think that will continue to be the case. I think it may become more elitist because I think the reason you'll go to
Mm.
school is to expand your mind and to learn new idea. It'll almost become like the Greek learning methodology of like we all just sort of like sit in a room and debate. And it's
Yeah.
about sort of like fleshing out these really complex ideas and thinking about these really complex ideas. And it's no longer going to be you go to school to learn accounting. You just
Mm.
nobody's going to need that. right? But that's no different than back in the 80s, you had to balance a ledger book, and now you just put it in Excel, right? You still need skills. Like that's a whole class in colleges is Excel, and you still learn the basics of accounting. But we're just moving further away from that because there's now a tool that can do it all for you. You might not even have to manage it very soon. That's just evolution. The same thing happened with like cars and assembly lines back in the early 1900s. There used to be just 10 dudes in a garage building cars, and they all knew how to do everything, how to fabricate the door panels and how to assemble the axles and the wheels and the engines. And they thought the world was falling or the sky was falling when they created assembly lines. And overnight, they were like, okay, Jim, yesterday you were an artisan. You worked with a group of 10 people and you guys built these beautiful pieces of art. Today, you screw a single screw into a door panel all day. But that was the path of progress, right? And that's what has cars everywhere and our ability to go anywhere and to meet with our customers and to see our family that traveled far away. Like things change, but we always find new solutions. So I'm typically a pessimist, but that is my optimistic sort of statement as we come to the end here.
No, I love that. Dylan, and to kind of wrap things up, I wanted to ask you if in your career, are there any sort of like frameworks or models that you have effectively used that have helped you that might particularly also be helpful for CS leaders out there?
So I have one that I have used and that by the time this podcast comes out, I'm publishing an ebook. It's coming out tomorrow. It's got a little bit about what we're talking about here, about the future of CS and where I think it needs to go. And this is a framework I put in the book, and it's called the Cut, Automate, and Defend framework. And it's just a super dead simple way to think about your processes within your organization, particularly as we begin to speak the language more of finance. The new CEO, the CFO, right? The guy who holds all the purse strings. And so I recommend that people do this on a regular basis, quarterly, if possible. And it's just this idea of analyzing all of your tasks and putting them in 3 buckets. Anything that doesn't contribute to revenue or strategic value or margins, aka efficiency, just get rid of it entirely. That's cut. And that's things like one-to-one trainings for low value accounts. Okay. Anything that has a very predictable logic, it never deviates. That's what you automate. So you find a way to automate that within the next period cadence, if that's quarterly. So onboarding milestone check-ins or birthday emails. Some companies still do stuff like that, or like anything that you're doing on a very predictable and repeatable basis. Lastly, are the pieces of work that directly tie to those outcomes that matter to the finance people. So revenue, strategic value, margins. So those are things like churn save playbooks or nurturing champions or executive syncs for, let's say, outsized engagement with expansion-ready accounts. Those are the sort of things that they might be a little bit upside down in cost, but they can speak to the numbers for the boardroom. Those are the things you defend. So that's cut, automate, defend, and that's a moving target. You got to do that every so often, right? I say quarterly. And the idea there is then you've got a playbook you can show that says, I'm constantly trying to keep this department lean and performing at the highest level and in a way that matters to the people at the top, in a way that we do not speak about today often enough in customer success.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah, that's a great. I look forward to seeing the ebook, Dylan, and reading that. So, we'll get you off on this note. We always like to wrap up with our guests with a quick kind of lightning round, quick questions and answers, a couple of them for you. It's been such a I have so many different thoughts about all the things that we've discussed, and we could be going on for hours here, but we'll wrap up with our lightning round. So, Dylan, you ready for a few quick questions?
Let's go.
All right, awesome. All right, we'll start you off really easy here. I might even know which what you gonna answer on this question. But first one is any favorite piece of content, book, podcast that you like to recommend or mention? Maybe a daily
We're
one.
no, well, I already mentioned that. I actually don't like
Yeah.
listening to that too much. I get enough of it when we record them. My favorite
I
pieces of
hear you.
content are like good TV shows, good serial TV shows, and really good movies, like the James Bond movies. I know they're not realistic, but they're so good to watch, right? They're so
Yeah,
good to watch.
Yeah.
Um, and
I love
then
them.
reading wise, I love Harvard Business Review. I think that it
Mm.
is a shining light in what is becoming like watered down content. I think they do such a good job of citing their resources, of being on the cutting edge. I mean, I've seen some phenomenal stuff in there, like they'll write stuff as niche as like the new version of NPS and like where they think that's headed, which is super applicable to what we do and to business in general. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, awesome. That's
Nice.
great recommendations. And yeah, Bond movies can never go wrong with 24 of them or something at this point. Seen
Yep, yep, yep,
all of
yep.
them myself a couple of times. So
He's
yeah,
always
all would be
dressed
there.
so well. Be
It's great.
James Bond.
Yeah, I'd say. Hey, it wouldn't be. Yeah, I love that. Awesome. All right, so let's take it to the next one here. Any favorite people to follow or get an inspiration from? Any specific person you want to mention or people?
There's nobody that I follow religiously, but there's somebody who every time their videos come up, particularly on like LinkedIn, I watch them. And it's this is not like a revelatory comment. Gary Vaynerchuk, I think, is such an interesting individual. Now, you could debate how successful he actually is versus like he inherited his dad's like $30 million company or whatever it was. But look, he's everywhere. I like what he has to say. He makes me feel good when he says it. I relate to him. And so I think that's what matters.
Yeah, no, yeah, the authenticity and relating to the content and the person is huge when it comes to showing that inspiration. So yeah, I really like that. And Dylan, my maybe favorite question I'd like to ask is any new ideas or concepts that you've learned about or heard recently that can really call your attention or your interest?
I'm going to take it off of, I think AI in general. I think how fast it's moving is really interesting to me. I was a huge detractor of AI when it first came out. I was like, oh, AI, you can't write your own emails? Like, what? But I think it's come a really long way. I kind of see a lot of the ways in which it can be applied. But Ivy, I loved this idea of the mandate for teaching it in school as early as 4 years old. My son's 3. He would not understand what I mean, I'll sometimes fire up ChatGPT and we'll ask animal questions to it, like the voice version, because he loves animals. He wants to know, like, what's the biggest type of whale in the ocean or like stuff
Oh,
like that. But man, 4 years old, that's insane. And I think that is so progressive. And it's an interesting intersection between politics and policy and where the world is headed. I love that. That's super cool.
yeah, it's so, so cool. Dylan, what is one life philosophy you like to live by?
Well, okay, I have 2. Can I do 2?
Yes.
So I have one I made up. It's not that great. It's just do good work. I think particularly in business, there's a lot of politics. There's a lot of stuff you don't control, but the one thing you do control is how hard, not how long you work. I don't believe in working super long hours, and that'll feed into my second one. But I do believe in doing very good work and standing
Mm.
behind your work and letting the chips fall where they may. You may end up having to be let go because of it could be a political thing. It could just be the company's performance, but you should always stand behind your work. And I think everything else falls into place if that's the case. Number 2 is this phrase, nobody will ever care how much you worked except for your family when they didn't see you. Okay? So let's zoom out and think about what really matters. Business is a lot of fun. Making money is fun. But that is nothing compared to creating the experience of the world for your children, for your family, spending time with loved ones. Life is short. Do not spend it only maximizing margins.
I love that. Love that. And what do you do on the weekends to decompress, Dylan? I mean, you obviously just mentioned you have a 3-year-old, so I'm assuming spending time with your family.
Yep. That's it. That's it.
Mm,
Uh,
Beautiful.
I get 2 hours on Saturday and Sunday for myself when he is napping, and everything else is all him, whatever he wants to do. And especially now that it's getting warm here, it's not 110 degrees here, a lot of time outside with him.
Oh, beautiful. And for anybody that is listening that wants to connect with you, what's the best way of doing that?
Find me on LinkedIn, Dillon Young. Dillon is spelled Dillon, or customervaluelabs.com.
Beautiful. Well, it has been an
Amazing.
absolute pleasure, Dylan. Thank you so much for
Yes.
being on the show.
Awesome.
Thank you so
Dylan.
much for the opportunity. Loved it.
Great. Thanks. Great having you on. Thanks, Dylan. See you soon.
We want to thank our sponsors for supporting the Success Revenue podcast. RevSetter is the #1 customer success and management platform in the Middle East region, offering global capabilities mixed with regional solutions that helps your CS, account management, and go-to-market teams 10x efficiency, improve customer experience, and turbocharge customer retention rates.
And thank you to Medlify, a leading marketplace. Workers and employers in the healthcare space needs and demands meet, create benefits for both sides. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.